Hey guys, tonight we descend into the sands of ancient Egypt, into the tomb of a boy king who ruled a world of gold, gods, and death. The air's dry, but heavy.
Sand crunches under your boots. Moonlight brushes the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. But the shadows are thicker than they should be.
Your lantern flickers. You're here for something most people never get close to.
Tutankhamun's tomb.
The real one.
Not the glass replica in Cairo. Not the touring exhibit with the fake mummies and overly excited docents. This is the real deal.
And you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here.
Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The pathway into the valley winds low through rugged rock formations.
The stars wheel overhead like they've been waiting for you.
Something about this place feels frozen in time, like the desert itself is holding its breath.
As you descend a slope of weathered limestone, your fingers trace over a sign. KV62, the designation for the tomb of Tutankhamun. The entrance is smaller than you imagined. Tighter, a simple set of ancient steps carved into the bedrock, dropping straight into shadow. You crouch, ducking under a rough wooden beam.
This isn't a theme park attraction. There's no guide, no ropes, no emergency exit.
You move forward anyway. A dry gust brushes your neck. Inside, the passage smells like age and salt. And something else.
Something almost sweet, like incense and mildew, had a very weird child. The flashlight beam skims across packed rubble.
A small corridor, about 10 feet long, lined with sandstone blocks.
You can't help but notice. Some of the stones look like they've been shifted ever so slightly out of alignment. Someone was here before. In fact, historical records confirm that grave robbers entered Tut's tomb just a few decades after his burial.
But strangely, they didn't get far. Most of the rooms remained untouched for over 3,000 years.
The reason? No one's quite sure. Maybe they were caught in the act. Or maybe they turned back.
For reasons they didn't write down. That breeze again against your cheek this time.
But there are no events.
No modern ductwork. Nothing that should be causing wind. You take another step forward. The walls are carved but faded.
You run your fingers over a painted falcon. Its wings spread wide. The detail is astonishing for something this old.
It stares back at you, not with malice, but with an eerie awareness. A soft clink.
Your boot just tapped something metal. You kneel.
Beneath a layer of fine sand is a rusted lantern, early 1900 seconds, probably dropped by Carter's team.
Still intact.
That makes you the second person in over a century to touch it. At the end of the corridor looms a wooden door.
Blackened by time.
Scarred,
but intact.
Across it is an ancient Egyptian wax seal, broken, then clumsily resealed. A
weird little fact. Howard Carter himself found this very seal in 1922 and documented its symbols meticulously. It bore the insignia of the necropolis gods, proof the tomb had been tampered with, then protected again.
But what's odd is that the second seal was actually older than the first. Historians still argue whether this was a decoy, a trap,
or something ritualistic. You feel a pang of hesitation. This is the moment. Behind this door lies the most famous tomb discovery in modern history, and something about it really doesn't want you here. Still, your hand reaches for the latch. The
wood creaks.
You push gently and the door cracks open an inch, coughing out a puff of stale air so dense it makes you gag.
You blink rapidly, eyes watering.
That scent like honey-rotted fabric and scorched stone crawls into your sinuses and settles there. Beyond
the doorway, darkness and deeper still. Gold, just a sliver, but unmistakable.
That warm gleam like candlelight caught in metal. Something enormous is piled just out of view. You step inside. Immediately, the temperature drops.
Not just cooler, but
unnaturally cold.
Your arms prickle with goosebumps, and you instinctively scan the walls, checking for vents, pipes, anything modern.
There's nothing.
Just stone and silence. A soft scratching sound drifts from behind you. You spin, light jerking wildly. Nothing. Just the hallway. Empty.
Still. Your heart's thudding now.
Faster than it should be.
But the air's thin, and you've just opened a sealed space for the first time in
centuries. You glance back toward the gold glint.
It's still there.
Waiting. You move closer. The ceiling lowers slightly, forcing
you into a crouch. Sand crunches underfoot again, except this time it's not sand.
Not exactly.
You shine the light downward and realize you're stepping on shards of ancient pottery. painted with fragments of hieroglyphs and half-erased spells. One, oddly, looks like a warning. You recognize the symbol for death, another for house,
and one that might mean soul. Taken together, it roughly translates to something like, "Death shall come on swift wings to he who disturbs the king's rest," but it's probably just coincidence. Right.
You push forward, into the shadows drawn.
Toward that golden gleam, and behind you, the door creaks quietly shut. The thud of the door closing isn't loud, but it lands like a punch to the gut. You spin, flashlight beam slicing through the dust. But there's no mechanism, no rope or trick hinge, just centuries-old wood easing back into place as if nudged by a courteous ghost. It's fine, totally fine.
Doors do that.
Air pressure, maybe.
You ignore the tiny voice in your head whispering that there wasn't any air moving, just a crypt-sealed vacuum, and focus instead on what's ahead. Treasure.
History, and the mild possibility of pharaonic vengeance. The room you step into is narrow and sloped, its ceiling sagging lower than before. The walls bear no decoration here, just smooth-cut stone, damp in some spots and faintly sparkling with
what looks like crystallized salt.
Your boots squelch slightly as you walk, which is the least fun sound you've heard in a while. And then, up ahead, something gleams again. You duck through a jagged doorway, this one broken open, not carved, and suddenly you're in the antechamber, and it is glorious chaos. Piled high from floor to ceiling are beds, boxes, statues, shields, and unidentifiable shapes, all wrapped in gold leaf and lion-headed glamour. Animal effigies with wide, staring
eyes, thrones with carved arms, a fan made of ostrich feathers frozen mid-flutter.
Over 5,000 objects were eventually catalogued from this space alone.
You almost forget to breathe. Then, a creak dot to your left. Something tall and narrow shifts slightly just a wooden shrine, probably settling.
Or not. One of the corners looks like it's been chewed. Rats, termites, a scarab beetle with an attitude problem. As you turn slowly to inspect it, your light falls on a single black spot on the wall.
Faint but deliberate.
A handprint, about the size of your own, smudged with soot or resin. There are two real-life theories about these marks.
Some Egyptologists believe they were left by embalmers laborers who handled sacred objects with unwashed hands. Others suspect it's symbolic, the last human touch.
Sealing the chamber, a kind of spiritual lock.
Historians still argue whether the handprints were accidental or intentional, and whether they mark the entrance, or warning not to pass. But you do pass. You carefully move between ornate chariots and a towering statue of the jackal-headed god Anubis, which sits low like it's about 2 pounds.
Its obsidian black sheen catches your reflection, warped and
too long. A joke forms in your head, something about not petting the dog, but dies before you say it, because then you notice the torches. There are old, soot-stained torch holders in the walls here.
That's expected, but these torches, 3 of them are missing.
Their iron sconce is empty,
and the soot looks recent, like someone lit them just a few weeks ago. Not 3,000 years. You crouch, fingers brushing the floor. Ash, fine black, modern, but there's no one else here, right?
Theories abound about who else may have entered this tomb before Carter's 1920 discovery. A few whisper about a second, unofficial entry maybe in the 1800s by Ottoman raiders, or even earlier.
What they were looking for, no one can confirm.
But what's strange is that very little seems missing.
The real question is why the tomb wasn't looted more thoroughly. You're pondering this when your flashlight flickers. Once, twice, then steadies. You keep moving. Past an overturned bed frame shaped like a sacred cow. Past a ceremonial box with faded ivory inlays. Past a gilded chair that somehow still looks comfortable. Then, at the far end of the antechamber, you see it. A sealed wall. Not another hallway. No open arch. Just a plastered over doorway with painted symbols and more broken seals. This is where Carter himself stood trembling in 1923, staring at the entrance to the burial chamber beyond. The plaster is cracked. The seal bearing Tutankhamun's royal cartouche is still mostly intact, though someone clearly pressed against it long ago. The fingerprint indentations are shallow, but fresh enough that they weren't here when Carter first photographed the doorway. You lean in, gently brushing the surface. There's a pulse of recognition,
like a key about to fit a lock.
Or a lock recognizing the key. A myth Carter never wrote about, but mentioned in quiet conversations years later, claims that after he touched the seal, his lantern blew out. Yours doesn't.
But you do feel a wave of moisture, sudden and sharp.
Like the room just dropped 3 degrees, you back away, instinct tightening your spine. Then you see it barely visible on the floor beside the sealed door, a small white feather, perfectly pristine. It shouldn't be here.
There are no birds, no cloth sacks, no reason at all. But there it lies, like something ancient dropped it on its way out. And here's the kicker. In ancient Egypt, the feather of Ma'at represented truth, justice, and judgment.
The souls of the dead were weighed against this feather to determine their fate in the afterlife. You, currently, are still very much alive. Probably, you turn back to the antechamber, suddenly aware that you are standing in a space no wider than your bedroom.
Surrounded by enough ancient wealth to bankrupt a nation and enough spiritual weight to make your chest ache. Something rustles in the corner. You freeze, light steadied and no movement, but there's that rustling again soft, like linen shifting.
From
inside a box, or maybe inside one of the ceremonial couches.
You blink and realize, with this slow burn of dread, that you are not alone, not anymore.
You don't move.
You hardly breathe, the rustling stops. You tell yourself it's probably fabric settling. Maybe the breeze that closed the door earlier just took its sweet time getting here.
Or maybe one of those beds shifted under its own weight
3,000 years of tension finally giving way to gravity. Totally plausible, and yet
your hand won't stop shaking. You blink away the sweat stinging your eyes and take a cautious step toward the sealed doorway. Behind this wall lies the burial chamber, the very heart of Tutankhamun's tomb. You already know what's behind it, a room that shook the world in 1923, that launched 1,000 documentaries and an entire century of mummy-themed cinema. But you're not watching from the safety of your couch this time.
you're in it, and the air suddenly feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. You raise your hand.
Touch the wall. It's cooler than the rest of the tomb.
That's not normal.
Stone equalizes over time.
This part feels fresh, like it hasn't
finished dying yet. With one firm push, the wall gives way slightly, the plaster crumbles, and you're peeking through the gap, just like Howard Carter did when he first broke through, except you're on your own.
No Lord Carnarvon whispering anxiously over your shoulder. Just you, a flashlight, and the awareness that if anything goes wrong, it's all on you. You squint into the darkness, and you see gold. Carter's exact words were, "Yes, wonderful things." He was describing what lay beyond the wall, massive golden shrines, statues, and the shrine-wrapped sarcophagus of King Tut himself.
But he didn't have to say the obvious. What he really saw was the untouched heart of ancient Egypt, and the echo of something much older than just royalty. You push further.
A larger chunk of plaster falls away. The beam of your light slides across the burial chamber, and your breath catches. There it is, the massive gilded shrine that encases the sarcophagus, nearly touching the walls of the room, carved with guardian figures, inscribed with prayers for protection, decorated with winged goddesses and images of Tutankhamun embraced by Osiris, god of the underworld, and in front of it, 2 black sentinels. They stand just under life size, one on either side of the door, carved of wood, painted jet black,
and wearing golden kilts and sandals.
Each carries a staff. Each stares forward, unmoving, watching. Now here's the unsettling bit. Those statues were never meant for the living to see.
They are protectors of the dead, placed at entrances to
ward of intruders, or, depending on the interpretation, to escort souls into the afterlife. You're not sure which role they're playing tonight. You squeeze through the hole. It's tight but manageable, and just like that, you're inside. The burial chamber is smaller than you expected. The walls are painted with deep ochre and gold. Scenes Tutankhamun being embraced by the gods, offered immortality, anointed in ritual. The colors are shockingly well preserved. It looks like someone finished the last brushstroke an hour ago. One quirky historical detail. Unlike most royal tombs, Tutankhamun's walls were painted with egg tempera, a cheap, fast-drying paint.
Many scholars believe this was a rush job, suggesting the boy king died suddenly and was buried in a chamber not originally built for him.
There's even evidence that the paint never fully dried before the tomb was sealed. Mold grew under the surface, preserving some pigments but degrading others. Historians still argue whether the tomb was intended for someone else entirely. You move closer to the central shrine. It's enormous, nearly filling the room.
Like a giant golden nesting doll, it contains multiple layers, 4 shrines, each
smaller than the last, wrapped around a red quartzite sarcophagus. Inside that, 3 coffins, and at the very center, Tutankhamun's mummy. But you are not there yet. First, you have to pass the statues. You hesitate just a second, then move forward, heart doing somersaults in your chest. As you pass between them, you feel heat. Not warm, heat, like you just walked through a sunbeam. Except the room is cold. You glance back. The statues haven't moved. Of course, they haven't. That would be silly. But one of them has something new at its feet. A tiny bead, blue faience. The kind used in funerary necklaces, and it's still warm. You stare at it, unsure what to feel.
Amused? Terrified?
Mildly annoyed. Because there's something deeply unfair about reality messing with you in a tomb full of supernatural warning signs. Still, you push on. You run your hand along the shrine's outer wall. The gold leaf is thinner than you imagined one in places, bubbled in others. Ancient humidity, trapped for centuries, played havoc with everything in here.
You imagine the craftsmen racing to finish it, unaware their work would be buried for millennia. And then your flashlight dies dot just dash click dash gone dot and oh.
Warning, just the softest pop and then darkness. Pitch black. You slap the side. Nothing.
Tap it. Twist it.
You even try blowing into the battery compartment like this is 1998 and it's a Game Boy.
Still nothing. The air feels like it's crawling. You take a careful step backward, hand outstretched, hoping to touch the statue, any statue, just
to orient yourself. But your fingers brush something else. Skin, dry, papery skin, and the unmistakable ridges of a linen wrap. You freeze. You didn't reach the statue. You didn't reach the shrine. You're not touching anything that should be standing. Here, slowly, your eyes adjust. There's just enough ambient light leaking in through the broken wall to reveal a faint shape in front of you. Tall, wrapped, tilted ever so slightly, like it's leaning forward, and it smells like burnt resin and old flowers. This isn't part of the exhibit. You don't scream. That would be too generous. Instead, your breath catches in a tiny, pathetic hiccup that sounds more like you swallowed a moth. Your hand is still out, hovering near the thing. You pull it back so slowly it feels like it takes
a year. Your fingertips tingling with the ghost of whatever you just touched. Linen.
Not fresh, not cotton or synthetic. The kind of brittle, ancient linen used only in burials. And the texture underneath leathery. Dry.
Stiff. You're 90% sure that wasn't there a minute ago. And here's the issue. Tutankhamun's mummy is supposed to be inside the sarcophagus within 3 nested coffins, each sealed tighter than a billionaire's prenup.
There should be no freestanding mummies in this room. 0. None. You take a shaky half step back. The figure doesn't move. Your eyes are adjusting now, and you start to make out the details. It's not quite human height, maybe 5'3", 5'4", small shoulders, narrow frame, arms crossed in the traditional Osirian pose, head wrapped in a faded shroud, not a golden mask, no identifying amulets, just standing there. There's a fringe theory dismissed by most serious archaeologists, but beloved by online forums, that a second body was buried in Tutankhamun's tomb. Some believe it was his half-sister, possibly his wife Ankhesenamun. Others
claim it's a symbolic car statue, meant to contain part of his soul.
One fringe researcher swore up and down there was evidence of a standing mummy created to fool tomb robbers or trick the gods. Historians still argue whether this idea holds any merit at all, but you are now giving it 100% of your
attention. You turn slightly, trying not to blink, and reach into your bag for your backup flashlight. It's wedged between your notebook and a half-melted protein bar.
You fumble for the switch. Click. Light. The beam hits the linen figure dead on, and it's gone. Vanished. You panic, sweeping the light across the room like a maniac. Walls, shrine, floor, no footprints, no shadow, just gold glinting back at you like it's in on the joke, of course.
Because ghosts don't leave footprints. Or maybe they do, and you're just not qualified to read them.
You suddenly wish you'd paid more attention to the museum. Gift shop book on hieroglyphs. All you remember is the one for life looks suspiciously like a keychain. You spin back to the sarcophagus, trying to get your bearings. Focus. There it is. The shrine's innermost wall, just visible past the gold inlays. 4 walls make up this golden box. You're currently standing between 2 of the guardians, just in front of the door. The actual sarcophagus, massive, heavy, solid quartzite, is
encased within. You inch closer.
And something tugs at your memory. Carter once noted that the resin poured over Tutankhamun's innermost coffin was so thick and overdone. It had to be chiseled off. Some believe it was intentional, a hurried
burial gone wrong. Others think it was a purification ritual that went too far. Some even claim it was a cover-up, that something about Tat's death was never meant to be uncovered. A faint hum rises in your ears. No, wait, not your ears.
The room. You step back and tilt your head. There's definitely a low-frequency sound vibrating through the chamber.
Subtle.
Barely audible, like the thrum of machinery.
But there's no tech down here.
No generators. No fans.
And absolutely no reason the stone under your boot should feel like it's vibrating. You crouch and place your palm flat against the floor. It's warm. Again, not possible.
This is subterranean rock. It should be cold and dry. You back away.
Slowly, eyes on the shrine, and that's when you see it. The outer sarcophagus is slightly ajar, just half an inch. Enough for a whisper to slip through. Enough for a smell to seep out thick and cloying, like pine pitch and old perfume.
It hits you like a wall. There's a joke in your throat about ancient Febreze, but it dies instantly. You step closer, drawn forward even as your instincts are clawing at your spine.
Because if the lid's cracked, it means something disturbed.
It, maybe recently, maybe you. You shine your light down the seam. Darkness, of course.
Thick and endless.
But there's movement too. The kind your brain doesn't quite register. Like static behind your eyes. You blink. Once. Twice. And it's gone. Still, you can't stop staring. What if Tutankhamun wasn't meant to be disturbed? Not just ritually, but physically. What if this tomb was designed not to preserve his legacy,
but to contain something?
There's an old theory.
More campfire tale than science.
It goes that Tutankhamun died under mysterious circumstances,
and the priests panicked and politically cornered used the burial rituals not to honor him, but to bind something to his remains.
An unfinished soul. A royal curse. A mistake, according to this theory. The curse wasn't a punishment. It was a warning. You back away from the sarcophagus, your light still trained on the gap. Then something inside moves. You don't see it clearly, just the faintest shift of shadow, but that's all it takes. You're out of the burial chamber before your brain has even caught up with your feet, heart punching your ribs like it wants out. You leap over ancient chariots, duck beneath sacred beds, and barrel into the hallway, scraping your arm against the rough stone. You don't stop. Not until you're crouched outside the tomb entrance again, lungs dragging in hot, moonlit air above. You, the stars don't blink. They just watch. And behind you, in the silent tomb, something shifts. Again.
You don't remember running, exactly.
Only that 1 second you were inside the burial chamber, and the next you were outside, collapsed against a sun-baked stone slab, your heart doing its best impersonation of a war drum. Now, seated in the
pale moonlight of the Valley of the Kings, you try to convince yourself you imagined it.
The mummy, the hum,
the ajar sarcophagus.
All of it. Just a panic response. Perfectly normal when you've spent too long underground with ancient relics and no phone signal. Except you glance back at the tomb's entrance.
Still open.
The air feels wrong. Too still.
The kind of stillness you notice only when every other sound in the world has died away. No wind.
No chirping desert geckos. Not even your own breath until you force it. And the most frustrating part.
You know you're going back in. You always were. You wipe the sweat from your face, curse softly at the grit in your mouth, and descend.
The steps once more like a moth returning to the world's oldest Bergzapper. This time, the tomb feels
awake. You don't mean that in the metaphorical sense. You mean it in the way a room changes when someone walks in.
Like it notices, like it's watching. Not hostile, not friendly either, just aware.
Your light returns to the antechamber, still a mess of ancient opulence.
Nothing obviously out
of place until your beam lands on the sealed door again. Except it isn't sealed anymore. The plaster is fully crumbled now.
Gone, as if it were never there. The doorway to the burial chamber yawns wide, blacker than shadow. You step forward, because...
Of course you do. But something new catches your attention just outside the threshold. A small wooden tablet, leaning against the wall. Roughly the size of a sheet of paper, cracked in one corner and painted with hieroglyphs. Fresh hieroglyph S.A.S.N. They weren't here before. The pigment glistens slightly.
A dark red brown. Not gold.
Not lapis.
Almost. Organic. You shine your light across it, trying to remember that one museum panel you skimmed. The symbols look familiar.
The Eye of Horus. The Ankh.
A bird. Maybe a falcon or an ibis. Then something else. The crook and flail, crossed behind a vulture's wings. That's royal imagery. Very old. Very serious. One symbol repeats 3 times, an oval shape enclosing a set of glyphs, a cottage.
And in it, the unmistakable name of Nebkapira, Tutankhamun's throne.
Name. There's a strange line beneath the cartouche. Not a typical divider.
Almost a cut mark.
Like someone meant to sever the name from the tablet, which, if you're rusty on ancient curses, is basically a cosmic do not disturb sign written in blood. You take a picture. Because you're not completely unhinged, then you step over it. The burial chamber is colder now, and emptier. The statues gone dot and no sound.
No heat, no vibration.
Just that same faint scent of resin and something sweeter. Something floral.
You remember reading once that ancient Egyptian embalmers used lotus, oil and frankincense during mummification.
It's a gorgeous smell, until you remember it was used to mask decay. You hesitate at the base of the shrine.
Still intact, still massive, still a golden box hiding another box hiding a king. But now, there's a gap between the floor and the
shrine wall, just wide enough for a small, shallow drawer. You crouch and find it by touch dusty, ancient, surprisingly smooth.
You give it a tug.
It doesn't resist. Inside, a single folded scrap of linen. You unfold it. Embroidered on it, in faded thread, is an eye.
Blue thread.
Perfectly symmetrical.
You recognize it instantly.
The eye of Ori, sun god, protector, destroyer, of chaos, also, according to some fringe circles. A symbol used to bind spirits. You sit back and think, why hide this under the shrine?
Why place an object of protection out of sight, where it can't protect anyone? Unless it wasn't for you, it was for him. There's a theory half joking, half tragic that Tutankhamun was buried in fear.
Not just the fear of a premature death, but the kind of existential dread you feel when your gods go quiet. Egypt was in turmoil when he died.
Religious upheaval, political power grabs. His father, Akhenaten, had tried to wipe out the old gods entirely. His mother may have been executed. Tut was a kid in a collapsing system, and some scholars believe his burial was as much about restoring order as honoring the dead. Historians still argue whether the tomb's irregularities, its hasty decoration, mixed iconography, and incomplete spells are signs of reverence or desperation. You pocket the cloth.
More from instinct than logic. Then the light changes. It's subtle. A shift in the shadows. The way candlelight dances behind a veil. You look up and something is reflected in the gold of the shrine. A shape. Behind you. Tall. Too tall. You turn dot and O.
One's there, but the reflection is, you blink.
Step left. The shape moves right. Not your movement. Not your silhouette. Not a trick of light. It's watching you. And it doesn't blink. You back away. One hand grazing the shrine for balance. Your fingers land on another seal, one you didn't see before. It's round, etched with tiny symbols. Not Egyptian, Greek, or order. That's when it hits you. This tomb wasn't just sealed for eternity. It was oversealed. Layers of protection. Cultures piling on top of each other.
Like people kept finding this place, and kept trying to lock it up again. You stare.
Back into the reflection. Still there, still watching. You don't know what it is, but you finally understand what this chamber is. A prison. Not for you, not for grave robbers, but for whatever Tutankhamun took with him into death. And the problem
is,
you've just opened the door. You step back, one slow, silent, deliberate step, as if sudden movement might trigger
something.
Like if you act like prey, you will become it. The reflection stays perfectly still.
No ripple, no distortion.
Just the shape tall, thin, humanoid.
In the most unnerving way. Its head to smooth,
shoulders to straight. A presence with no face. But your brain fills in the gaps with something that looks a little too much like your own silhouette. You kill your light, because clearly, that's a smart thing to do right now. The chamber drops into pitch darkness. Not silence though. No, not anymore. You hear a slow sound, almost like breathing long, drawn out. Not yours. Deeper, heavier, wet at the edges. You flick the light back on in a panic. The shrine's golden surface is bare again, and a reflection. But now there's something else scratched faintly into the wall beside you.
Something that wasn't
there before. Symbols.
Not hieroglyphs this time. Tally marks. Just 5. Like someone was counting the days.
Or the visitors. You run your hand over them. The scratch marks are shallow but recent. There's a little powdery grid at the base of each line.
Fresh dust. Something in here is still active, still marking time, which is definitely not what you were hoping to learn today. You take a step toward the main sarcophagus. You haven't looked directly at it yet, because some part of you has been delaying that final reveal.
But you know you have to now. The outer gold shrines surround it like Russian nesting dolls.
Shrines within shrines within shrines.
Carters.
Team had to dismantle them over months using primitive tools, chiseling through ancient wood fused together with resin. When they finally reached the innermost coffin, the one made of solid gold, they realized something odd.
The resin was charred, burned, almost cooked. This isn't normal.
Not even for Egyptian burials.
Some scholars speculate it was an accident, an over-enthusiastic pour of hot resin during the funeral.
But others believe the body caught fire after.
Burial, during a chemical reaction caused by improper embalming.
A few go even further, claiming the fire was a deliberate act of spiritual purification. A last-minute attempt to cleanse or contain something. Historians still argue whether it was a mistake.
Or a ritual. Now, standing before the sarcophagus, you smell it, burnt resin.
Stronger now.
The thick sweetness curling into your sinuses. It hits like a punch of forgotten grief. A funeral that never ended. The quartzite coffin is massive, 8 feet long, carved with protective goddesses. The gold funerary mask, famously discovered atop the innermost coffin, is nowhere in sight.
Now, it's in a museum.
Safe.
Allegedly. But something else rests where the mask once was. A headless statue, carved of dark basalt, about the size of a human baby. No inscriptions, no cartouche,
no base, just sitting there at the foot of the coffin, like it wandered in and never left. You reach out, against all your better judgment, and gently tap its surface. Warm, because of course it is. A story comes back to you. One of those fringe tales they never include in textbooks. Supposedly, during Carter's early excavations, a local worker had a dream of a statue walking the corridors at night, whispering in a forgotten tongue. The dream was so vivid, he quit the dig the next day and never returned.
Carter dismissed. It is nonsense. But a few other workers quietly reported the same figure, headless, walking, whispering. They started calling it the Watcher. You stare at the statue. It stares at nothing. A faint click makes you jump. It's behind you. You spin, light beam wide and ready to fry any dust bunny in its path.
But the chamber's empty, except the sidewall now bears a long vertical crack, and from within, you hear scraping, soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on the other side. You freeze, hand tightening on your flashlight. The crack is thin,
too narrow for anything to come through. Probably just the stone settling. You tell yourself that, over and over, like a bedtime story you don't believe. Then like someone flicking a switch, the temperature drops. Again, your breath fogs. That's not a metaphor.
Actual fog, inside a tomb in the Egyptian desert. You shine the beam around wildly now, nerves officially shredded, and that's when you see it. A shadow on the far wall. You whip the light toward it, but there's nothing there. You turn back. The shadow is gone, but the tally marks have changed. There are now 6. You didn't hear anyone else enter. You didn't feel anything pass. But someone or something is keeping count. You start backing away again.
1 foot at a time.
Careful not to bump anything.
Careful not to say anything.
Even your breathing is hushed now, as if the tomb has learned to breathe with you, and now it's trying to learn how to stop. And then you hear a whisper. Just one word dot in a voice that sounds
like yours, but older. Stay.
You don't stay. You sprint. Or rather, you try to sprint. But ancient tombs aren't built for panic.
Your foot clips the edge of a shrine base, and you go stumbling into a pile of linen-wrapped objects. A cloud of old dust blooms into the air.
Like a curse made visible when you blink your watering eyes clear. You find yourself face to face with it. The mask, not the real one, of course. That's safely locked in a climate-controlled glass case at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
Or so they say, but this replica is stunningly accurate.
So accurate, in fact, that for a split second your mind is convinced it's real.
It lies in a glass
crate, forgotten among lesser treasures, and it's looking at you. You know the face even before your flashlight fully lands on it.
Smooth gold, deep sapphire inlays, the iconic striped headdress, and those perfect, emotionless eyes.
It's a mask that was never meant for life.
It was built to stare through eternity. Tutankhamun, boy Pharaoh, son of Akhenaten, husband of his own sister, dead before 18,
buried in haste, forgotten in history until he wasn't. You lean closer, studying the features, the lips, so still, the lapis-lined brows,
the blue and gold stripes curving back like wings, and in that moment, you don't see a king. You see a kid, a child ruler born into chaos, crowned too early, likely manipulated by priests and advisors. His name meant living image of our moon, ironic, considering his father, Akhenaten, tried to erase the Tutankhamun from history entirely.
Historians still argue whether Tut was a puppet or a political reformer.
Whether he had any real agency, or was just a symbol. You feel a sudden rush of empathy.
He didn't ask for this. Not the throne, not the tomb, not the fame.
Not the mask, especially not the curse. The scent of incense clings to the air again.
Sudden and sickly sweet. Not modern, not synthetic. Something old, like burnt myrrh and crushed lotus. Your light flickers. When it steadies, something about the mask has changed. The eyes, they're wet. You stagger back.
The room sways.
You blink, and they're dry again. Maybe you're dehydrated. Maybe you hit your head.
Or maybe the mask just
Blinked and you caught it mid-move. Totally normal, and yet, as you backpedal, your gaze is drawn to a carved scene on the wall behind it. Not one you've noticed before. It's faint, almost erased.
You rub away the grime with your sleeve. It
shows Tutankhamun small, youthful being cradled by a larger, godlike figure, but the god's face is missing, chiseled out deliberately. Strange.
The ancient Egyptians were obsessive about preserving facial features in carvings.
Without a face, a soul couldn't recognize its likeness in the afterlife. So, why erase the god's face? Some fringe researchers
claimed this was a warning that Tutankhamun's soul was misplaced in death,
that the gods abandoned him. Others whisper that his car, the spiritual double, was sealed inside the mask itself.
a containment,
Not an honor. As you stare, another shape emerges beside the relief.
faint, human height. Nope, not doing this again. You spin around,
But there's nothing behind you, just a wide corridor stretching back into the tomb's outer rooms. You forgot
how far you've wandered in.
the walls seem to ripple in your peripheral vision. The floor slopes more than you remember. You walk slowly, flashlight beam jumping with each heartbeat, and that's when your foot hits something soft, a sandal, old, woven, frayed at the edge, just lying in the middle of the corridor. You remember reading that 2 pairs of ornate sandals were found in Tutankhamun's tomb, never worn, too small, made of gold and leather. But this one's dirty, used, the sole worn almost through, and there's a second one a few steps ahead,
Leading forward.
a trail you don't want to follow. You do anyway. The passage leads to a side chamber, one of the storage annexes, boxes piled high,
Bits of chariots, bow cases,
a child's game board, even embalming tools, including some used on Tut himself. And there, in the corner, half covered in a linen sheet, a wheelchair. You freeze. Tutankhamun was young and kingly in art, athletic, powerful,
but CT scans done in the early 2000s revealed
something less majestic. He was sick,
malformed left foot,
possibly clubbed, evidence of malaria.
a broken leg shattered just before his death.
Some say infection from that injury is what killed him. Others suggest darker ends. Assassination theories run wild. A blow to the head, a sudden fall, poison. Historians still argue whether it was disease
Or betrayal, but the wheelchair,
that was real, discovered in pieces, reconstructed, made of gold and wood.
built for someone who struggled to walk. He wasn't a golden god. He was a teenager in pain. You find yourself sitting,
Breathing heavily. It's too much. The death, the distortion, the way he was forgotten, then remembered only as a spectacle, a mask, a myth. You close your eyes and hear footsteps, barefoot.
light, but coming closer. You snap them open. The corridor is empty, but the sandals,
Gone. And the tally marks?
well, you can't see the wall from here, but somehow you know there
Are 7 now.
The 7th mark itches in your mind. You haven't even looked back yet, but you know it's there, scratched into old limestone like fingernails on school desks. You'd laugh if your throat weren't so dry.
But 7 feels like a pattern, and you don't like where that's going. The corridor breathes behind you.
At least it feels that way. You finally stand, legs slightly trembling.
You've wandered from curiosity into something else entirely. And yet you don't leave because the story isn't finished. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to feel like you're a part of it. You retrace your steps through the side chamber.
Flashlight picking out familiar shapes now coated in a new layer of dread.
The dusty game board you passed earlier now looks arranged,
Pieces set mid-play, as if something was in the middle of a match.
waiting for a move. You don't roll the dice. The antechamber feels almost cozy after the burial rooms. You take a breath.
The air is dry, but it doesn't taste quite so heavy. You lean against the wall and tell yourself to calm down.
To remember the facts, but the facts aren't that comforting. Because here's one. Lord Carnarvon Howard Carter's financier, the guy who made the whole excavation possible, died just months after the tomb was opened. That's not unusual. On its own, he was already in poor health.
A mosquito bite on his face became infected after a razor nicked it.
Sepsis set in, then pneumonia. But here's where it gets strange. T the exact moment he died, all the lights went out in Cairo, every single one. The city plunged into darkness, and back in England,
His dog Susie reportedly howled and dropped dead at the same time. Coincidence?
maybe, but the media didn't think so. Pharaoh's curse strikes again, screamed headlines across the world.
Papers ran sensational stories about ancient,
Revenge, vengeful priests,
mystic symbols.
readers ate it up like popcorn at a horror flick.
Everyone loves a curse until it's personal. You pass a mirror tucked between two crates. Odd place for it.
Probably ceremonial. Your reflection jumps out at you disheveled, pale, streaked with tomb grime. Your lips twitch upward in the tiniest smirk. Still alive, you mutter.
Still cute. But as you turn to move on, something delays your reflection. Just a fraction of a second, you freeze.
Backtrack, the mirror is still. Your reflection moves with you.
But now that you're staring, really staring,
You notice something odd. There's someone behind you. Not in reality, in the reflection. A tall, slim figure, wrapped in white, just standing behind your left shoulder. You whirl around. Empty corridor, but in the mirror.
still there, you don't blink.
You just reach slowly behind you and wave your hand through the space. Nothing. Cold air. You look back at the mirror. Gone. The reflection grins at you. You no longer feel cute. A scraping sound pulls you back to reality. You swing your light around. One of the storage chests has shifted. Not by much. Just enough to reveal what's underneath. A canopic jar. You've seen them in photos. Ornate.
Symbolic.
Used to hold organs removed during mummification.
Lungs, liver, intestines, and stomach.
The brain.
Scooped out and tossed.
The heart. That.
Was meant to stay for judgment. But Tut's heart.
Missing. Never found. No trace.
Historians still argue whether it was stolen, destroyed in the embalming fire, or removed in some act of punishment. And the jar before you. It's broken, jagged edge, clean fracture.
No lid. Empty. You don't touch it. That feels like a line you
Don't want to cross. A rustle behind you. You spin again.
Nothing. Just whispers now.
Very faint. Like a breeze moving through cloth.
You follow the sound. One slow step at a time. Deeper into the tomb's rear chamber. That's when you see it. The tally wall. 7. Definitely 7. And they're fresh. Not ancient carvings. Not soot.
Not paint.
Scratched.
Gouged with something sharp, as if done in a rush. You press a finger to the stone.
Still gritty. Still crumbling slightly at the edges. And now a new sound joins the whispers. A cough. Raspy.
Wet.
Human. Too human. You turn your light slowly toward the shadows and catch the edge of a shoe disappearing behind a curtain of hanging. Beads. Modern shoe. Not a sandal. You weren't alone. Maybe you still aren't. You move closer to the beads. They look Egyptian, sure, but new Egyptian. Like something bought at a tourist stall in Luxor. Not unearthed after 3,000 years.
They sway gently, but not from your breeze. Someone passed through them.
Moments ago. You push them aside and step through and find a sleeping bag. What? It's unzipped.
Half-packed. Beside it, a battery lantern. A crushed water bottle.
A half-eaten protein bar.
You lift a notebook from the floor, spiral bound.
Labeled. The curse is real. Field notes GH you flip through. Scribbles. Maps. Diagrams of the tomb.
A calendar with red XS.
7XS. Each next to a name. You freeze. The 7th? Yours. You hear the cough again.
Closer this time. You drop the notebook, then a voice.
Barely a whisper. Too late now.
You turn. No one's there. But you're not sure.
That matters anymore, because the jar is whole again, and there are 8 marks on the wall.
You're back in the antechamber, but it doesn't feel like the same room anymore. Every object, the gilded couches, the shattered chariot, even the ceremonial fans with ostrich feathers looks just slightly off.
Like they've shifted in your absence.
As if they've been watching, waiting for your return.
It's the kind of room you could stare at for hours, and still miss the moment something moved. You blink hard, as if that might shake off the fog. You're not sure what's real anymore. You've seen mirrors that lie, canopic jars that heal themselves, and a name scribbled in a dead man's notebook that matches your own.
Sleep-deprived hallucinations.
Sure, let's go with that. But the deeper explanation, the one that your rational mind refuses to entertain, is starting to look more likely, because the deaths are real. And they're stacking up. You shuffle
through your dusty memory of who died when in the years after Tutankhamun's tomb was opened. It's not just Lord Carnarvon. That would have been spooky enough. But there's also George J. Gould, an American railroad tycoon who visited the tomb in 1923. Perfectly healthy until he wasn't. He came down with a sudden fever and died.
A few days later, his condition
mysterious. His timing a little too perfect. Then there's Prince Ali Camel Fahmy Bey, an Egyptian nobleman shot by his wife in London just months after seeing the tomb, and Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's
half-brother.
He was going blind, but refused surgery for years.
Then, suddenly, he changed his mind, went under the knife, and died from post-op complications within days of Carnarvon's funeral. You remember reading somewhere that up to 20 people connected with the tomb died premature deaths.
Newspapers counted them obsessively, like it was a dark bingo card. Still, historians argue whether the curse was anything more than coincidence.
After all, some key players like Howard Carter lived for over a decade afterward.
Carter himself died peacefully in 1939, completely uncursed and fully pensioned. But the press didn't care. They were having too much fun. Death comes on.
Wings to he who enters, they claimed was inscribed above the tomb entrance. It wasn't.
The tomb had no such warning.
But let's be honest. Reality is never as spooky as fiction, so the tabloids made it up, and readers loved it. One American paper printed a full-page illustration of an Egyptian mummy emerging from its
sarcophagus and strangling a terrified archaeologist.
Kids started dressing as cursed explorers for Halloween. The mummy genre was practically born overnight. Boris Karloff thanks you, of course. Some scholars have tried to explain the deaths scientifically.
One theory blames toxic mold spores sealed in the tomb for centuries. Aspergillus flavus, if you want to sound fancy.
It could theoretically cause respiratory infections, especially in older or immune-compromised people.
Other theories cite radioactive, dust, but guano, or just good old Egyptian bacteria. But even if those theories are true,
they don't explain the timing, or the way people died, or the fact that, sometimes, they seemed to know what was coming.
You think again of Carnarvon's
mosquito bite, a tiny thing,
practically nothing,
but it just kept getting worse.
You rub your own cheek nervously.
Nothing there, yet you remember another tale less famous, but somehow more disturbing. Sir Bruce Ingram, a friend of Carter's, was gifted a mummified hand as a paperweight.
That's not a typo, a mummified hand.
Classy, right? Anyway, it was.
Supposedly from another tomb, not Tutankhamun's.
But the hand had a scarab bracelet around its wrist, inscribed with a message: "Cursed be he who moves my body.
To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Shortly after receiving the gift, Ingram's house burned down. When he rebuilt, it was flooded.
His health took a dive.
Pestilence?
Check. Did he return the hand?
You bet he did. You scan the antechamber.
Again, feeling a fresh prickle on the back of your neck. It's suddenly quiet. Too quiet. Not a single whisper, footstep, or breeze. You don't like it. Your flashlight flickers once, then steadies.
You raise it again and shine it toward the sealed door leading into the burial chamber.
The one Carter had cracked open nearly a century ago. The one you already stepped through. But now it looks sealed again. Not just shut. Walled off, your pulse jumps. You rush over, hands pressed to the stone.
It's solid, seamless, like it never opened in the
first place. What is this? A time loop? You mutter, maybe.
Or maybe it's something worse. You suddenly recall a fringe theory from a late-night history podcast, the kind hosted by a guy with too many rings and an unsettling number of cats. He claimed the tomb wasn't just a burial site, but it was a spiritual snare.
A trap designed not to keep people out, but to keep something in. Not a curse on the living, a prison for the dead. And the more attention it gets, the more energy it feeds on. You turn slowly.
The room no longer feels abandoned. There's a presence.
Here, subtle, but watching. Like a cat curled in the dark, tail twitching, eyes glinting.
You're not sure whether it's Tutankhamun, or something that died with him, or something that never did. Your breath is too loud. Your footsteps feel heavier.
The weight of the place presses in, and somewhere in the back of your mind, one more historical fact pops up like a rogue browser tab. When Carter found Tutankhamun's tomb, the seal on the outer door had been broken.
Once before, not recently, anciently, someone else had gone in
and come back out.
that they sealed it again, and whoever they were, they wanted this place left alone, forever. You step back, staring at the blank wall that used to be a doorway.it. Doesn't blink.it, just waits. Your boots crunch faintly on the sandy floor as you back away from the wall that shouldn't exist. For a moment, you wonder if you've dozed off standing up, hallucinated the whole thing, but no, your heart's still drumming a desperate rhythm, and that eerie static in the air is too real to ignore. You swing the flashlight around to rearrange yourself, aiming it toward a familiar crate half buried under a velvet cloth.
The label reads, Catalogue Box Number 56 Miscellaneous Fauna and Personal Effects.
It's the kind of unglamorous designation that makes you wonder how many cursed trinkets have been shrugged off as miscellaneous. You reach inside Dort in oh screaming spirits. No snakes.
Just wait.
You draw out a tiny feather-like object, a canary, stuffed, long dead. The yellow feathers are brittle with age, its eyes glassy and clouded. This isn't just a random bird, this is the canary, Howard Carter's own mascot. He brought it to the dig as a good luck charm. Locals called it the lucky bird. It sang every morning from its tiny cage, trilling over the dust and heat.
Until one morning, it didn't, because a cobra had slithered into Carter's residence and coiled itself around the bird's cage. Killed it. Right there, in the heart of Camp Q Panic. Cobras weren't just venomous.
They were sacred.
They adorned Pharaoh's crowns, the
Urias, the symbol of divine authority and protection. For a cobra to strike down the lucky bird, just as Carter began to uncover the tomb.
Let's say people weren't calling it a coincidence. The workers whispered about it in the heat, voices low and eyes darting.
The king has sent his serpent. Now, here it is again.
Not the snake, just the bird, mummified by time or guilt, or maybe both.
You set it down gently. That's more than Carter did. You glance over at another box. This one bound with leather straps. Inside, odd fragments.
Not the treasures you'd expect, no gold, no lapis, no ceremonial daggers. Instead, you find scraps of what look like journal, entries, and a sketch of a blackened tongue. One page catches your eye. The museum would not display the piece.
They say the whispers are louder at night.
The night guards have refused to enter the wing. They left offerings, in a modern museum.
What is this? 1920 or ancient Thebes? The piece in question, if you recall correctly, was a small ivory box pulled from one of the storage annexes in the tomb.
Not flashy,
but oddly magnetic. People who touched it reported strange dreams.
Heavy sleep. One curator claimed he aged 2 years in 6 weeks. Did he? No one could prove it. But he did resign. Quickly. This brings you to one of the weirder historical footnotes, the disappearance of several minor artifacts. Not the golden throne or the solid gold coffin. Those were all meticulously documented, photographed, studied. No, what's missing are the trinkets. Personal amulets. A bone comb.
A piece of linen bandage.
A child's carved toy. Some were lost in transit, others misfiled.
A few were quietly discovered in private collections, decades later. No one wanted to say how they got there. But the owners,
they had stories. One collector in Paris claimed the little carved toy would sometimes move overnight, just a few inches, but always closer to the edge of the shelf.
As if preparing to jump, he kept it in a locked case.
Then in a bank vault.
Then in the Seine.
Problem solved.
Another artifact, Tut's ivory game board, was said to emit a faint hum.
Subaudible.
More like a vibration. Visitors to its display reported nausea, dizziness.
Some claimed headaches. Others, visions. The
museum eventually moved it to storage. You closed the crate slowly. It's starting to feel like the treasures weren't meant to be shared.
They were personal, intimate, and now they've been torn from their silence, boxed and shipped around them. Globe like postcards from the dead. Carter had insisted the so-called curse was nonsense. No curse, he said, has harmed me. True, but you wonder if it harmed others to get to him. Even his house was touched. Alnwick House, his London residence, is rumoured to still carry the energy of the tomb.
Visitors describe a heavy feeling.
Upon entering, sudden cold spots.
The occasional whisper when no one else is home. Once, a journalist snuck in during a tour. He took a photograph of Carter's study.
Just one. When developed, it showed Carter sitting at his desk. Problem is, Carter had died 10 years before. The photograph was quietly buried. So was the journalist's career, of course. Historians still argue whether these stories are overblown spun.
By media hype, superstition, and a public obsessed with the macabre. But you start to wonder if those stories created something, or uncovered something already lurking. You're shaken out of your thoughts by a soft sound, A hiss, not aggressive.
Not close, but insistent, like a leaking pipe.
Where is keeping us sealed?
Tomb, you scan the room.
The cobra?
No, impossible. Nothing moves, but you feel it. That ancient, bone-deep hiss of time spilling through cracks in stone.
Or sanity? You want to leave, but you can't, because one more crate sits unopened.
Larger than the others, labelled not with a number, but a single name, Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's wife. And maybe, just maybe, the key to the whole story. You reach for the lit dot it creaks. Inside, just fabric, torn linen perfumed long ago,
Bits of jewelry, a broken ring,
and a fragment of papyrus with a love poem still clinging to its fibers. You and I, we live again, where time is swallowed, where death is soft as linen, where your voice still reaches me in dreams. Your hands are trembling now, because it hits. You, this wasn't just a burial dot, it was a binding, and the things that should stay bound are stirring. You barely blink as the shadows shift around you.
That faint hiss still echoes in your ear, even though the room is silent. It's not just the air anymore. It's like something's breathing with you, or under you. Still, you don't move. Your hand lingers on the edge of the open crate, your eyes fixed on the torn fragment of the love poem.
The words seem fragile enough to crumble with a breath, yet powerful enough to summon ghosts. Ankhesenamun, the teenage queen who married her half-brother,
Whose life was a chess game of dynasties and deities, whose fate, like so many others in this saga, has been swallowed by silence. But it's Tutankhamun himself you've come here for.
and you can feel it.
He's close. You turn away from the artifact boxes, brushing sand from your sleeves.
There's one place you haven't truly faced yet. The mummy, it's easy to forget, with all the glitter and drama, that at the heart of this story is the broken body of a boy,
Dead at 19, trapped for eternity in golden shells and layers of myth.
and when Howard Carter and his team finally unwrapped him when they reached past the sarcophagi, the golden coffins, and the linen wrappings, they didn't find peace. They
Found a puzzle. You kneel next to the blackened, shriveled form.
Even now, even after all the tests, the X-rays, the CT scans, no one agrees on what happened. You look closely, the body is charred, as if burned, but not in a fire. The flesh appears to have been chemically scorched, perhaps by the very oils used during burial. Historians still argue whether it was a botched embalming or something far stranger.
One theory,
The resin was poured boiling hot. Another,
the body spontaneously combusted inside the sarcophagus. That seems extreme. But you've seen Stranger tonight. The skull is cracked.
the left side flattened. Was it an accident?
Maybe he fell.
From a chariot? Maybe he was struck from behind.
Some say it was murder. A deliberate blow.
Those CT scans in 2005 cast doubt, suggesting the injury might have happened after death, perhaps during rough handling when Carter's team extracted the body. But then there's the missing sternum,
The absence of ribs.
the mangled leg. Tut's left foot was severely deformed.
Possibly due to inbreeding, which we now know was common among Egyptian royalty.
DNA tests suggest his parents were siblings. Let that sink in. The most famous pharaoh.
In modern history may have ruled briefly, limped through life, and died confused and in pain, his family tree more like a tightly coiled vine. There's a bit of poetry in it. You reach into your satchel and pull out a tablet. The screen flickers to life, showing a 3D reconstruction of Tutankhamun's face based on CT data and forensic modeling. The image looks ordinary.
Not the flawless golden god of the funerary mask, just a soft-featured teenager with a slight
Overbite and a gaze that seems tired of being studied. You glance back at the mask. The two don't match, and that raises an unsettling thought. Was the famous death mask even meant for him? It may have been made for someone else, possibly a queen. The pierced ears on the mask suggest it was crafted for a woman or a very young boy.
Some scholars think it was hastily reproposed, a rush job. After all, his burial was weirdly incomplete. The tomb itself was unusually small and lacked the grand architectural flair expected for a king. Paint on the burial chamber walls was still wet when the tomb was sealed. Some of it even showed signs of mold growth, likely from rushed painting.
Under poor conditions, why the hurry? Was someone trying to bury the truth literally? You back away from the body, heart thudding.
Your thoughts swirl as fast as the desert wind.
You think of the missing artifacts, the patchy history, the royal bloodline full of dead ends and disappearances. Ankhesenamun vanished from records.
No known burial, no known children.
I, the man who succeeded Tutankhamun and possibly married,
Ankhesenamun against her will took the throne like a final exhale of a dying dynasty.
His image replaces Tut on some temple walls.
The boy king nearly erased, just as the ancient Egyptians had tried to erase his heretic father. Akhenaten, you blink, trying to shake the growing dread, because now it hits you. This wasn't just
a cursed tomb. This was a cover-up. A flash of metal catches your eye, something glinting under the edge of the sarcophagus platform.
You crouch down and reach. It's a small scarab amulet, tarnished but intact.
You brush at the dust.
The glyphs are barely legible, but one stands out. Air magic, or power.
This one is carved from desert glass,
formed by ancient meteors striking the Sahara.
The kind of thing that feels alien even to this planet. Tutankhamun's pectoral necklace featured a large piece of the same glass. You hold the scarab tightly if the pharaoh's final request was to be left in peace, surrounded by objects of power, bound in ritual, encased in symbols. Then maybe.
What followed wasn't a curse. Maybe it was. Enforcement. The mummy lies still, but the air feels heavier.
The temperature subtly cooler. You check the vents, nothing. Just that pressure again, like a hand pressing gently but persistently against
your shoulders. You want to stand, but your knees resist. There's one last rumor floating to the top of your mind. You're not even sure where you read it. One of Carter's assistants once claimed he saw the body move. Just a twitch. Just a subtle shift in the arm position between the days of unwrapping. He didn't report it. He quit. That same year. You reach for your bag, fingers trembling, when the lights flicker. Just once. You freeze. The hum of electricity returns, but it's off-key like a song you almost remember from a dream, but can't place. You exhale, and for the briefest second, you swear. The corpse smiles. You stumble backward, blinking fast like you're trying to shake off a hallucination. But you know what you saw, or think you saw,
or definitely didn't imagine. Either way, you're done being down here with him. You slip the scarab into your pocket and turn away from the mummy. Time to climb out of this gilded graveyard and get some air, or, more realistically, step into a sterile museum lab reeking of latex gloves and archival glue.
But after what just happened, even that sounds like a vacation. You step into the corridor, the sandstone wall swallowing your footsteps, and find your way back toward the research wing.
This is where the story takes its sharpest turn, where science tries to shine a fluorescent light on things that perhaps prefer darkness. Because modern researchers, armed with CT scanners, DNA kits, and a lot of coffee, have tried to pry apart every mystery Tutankhamun ever took to the grave, and in the process, they've raised even more questions. You enter the climate-controlled room where replicas of the royal remains are studied.
It's like being in Tutankhamun's garage, models of his skull on one shelf, full-size resin casts of his skeleton on another, plus dozens of scan results tacked to the walls like a mad professor's vision board. You remember one of the most controversial scans, 205.
The big one. The CT team revealed that Tut wasn't stabbed in the back or bludgeoned in the skull, as many had claimed.
Instead, they pointed to a broken leg that showed signs of infection. Infection plus compromised
immune system plus genetic health problems equals natural death. Simple, right? Except no one believes it's simple. Theories still swirl.
Some scholars argue the fracture occurred post-mortem, possibly during Carter's rough retrieval of the body.
Others say Tut might have died from malaria, which DNA analysis confirmed. He had, along with bone necrosis and a clubfoot, and yes, the DNA evidence also suggests his parents were full siblings.
This isn't just tabloid stuff, it's peer-reviewed, painful and real, which also means his own wife was his half-sister. You shake your head.
It's like Egyptian royalty had Tinder filters set to must share a grandparent. The genetic damage was clear.
Elongated skull,
Feminine hips, cleft palate,
underdeveloped immune system.
No wonder he limped through life, literally.
CT imaging revealed he needed a cane to walk.
Dozens were found in his tomb, some visibly used. The boy was fragile,
sheltered, and yet he ruled. Sort of. Historians
still argue whether Tutankhamun was an independent king or a puppet controlled by priests and advisors like I and Horemheb.
What's known? He reversed his father Akhenaten's radical reforms and restored the old gods Amun, Osiris.
Basically, he undid a decade of monotheistic chaos, which made him a convenient symbol. A young pharaoh returning Egypt to balance, and then he died, maybe of disease,
maybe of injury, maybe of something we still haven't named. His burial was rushed. his successors suspiciously eager to erase his name, even in death. He wasn't safe, which brings you to the second wave of scientific investigation. What happened after the tomb opened?
Because this is where science tries to confront superstition head-on.
And sometimes loses. A group of researchers once tested it out inside sealed Egyptian tombs. They found toxic mold was like Aspergillus niger and Stachybotrys cartarum, known to cause respiratory failure in vulnerable individuals. Oh, maybe the curse was really just mold. Except, not everyone died of lung infections. Some dropped, dead of strokes.
Others in car crashes.
One man was poisoned. Another disappeared entirely. Too much variety.
Too much weird timing. Historians still argue whether these were genuine coincidences, or if opening the tomb truly disturbed something.
Beyond the physical, you lean against the wall, watching a lab technician run a simulation of Tut's burial process. The screen shows liquid resin being poured over a linen-wrapped mannequin, recreating the thick, tarry shell they found around the mummy. According to this simulation, the oil was overheated, possibly boiling, which chemically scorched the body. It wasn't incompetence, it was haste. Why the rush?
Was there a plague?
Political instability.
A secret to hide.
You tap the screen to pause the playback.
The mannequin's face is half melted.
Charred. Silent. You think again of that smile in the tomb. Was that just your mind playing tricks? Or was it a warning? You push open the door to the artifact storage vault where items from the tomb are rotated for study.
This is where you find the Ankh pendant,
The crook and flail. The canopic shrine that once held his organs. They're all here. All accounted for. Almost. One container is labeled unidentified funerary item, removed 1933, location unknown. That item, whatever it was, is gone.
Missing for nearly a century.
Some suspect it was stolen.
Others say it was lost during a private museum trade. But fringe theorists, they say it's the linchpin of the curse. You smile to yourself.
A little. You'd roll your eyes harder if your hands weren't still shaking. A breeze crosses the
back of your neck. The lab has no windows. You turn.
No one's there. The lights are steady. Your heartbeat is not. You lean into the edge of the display case and whisper under your breath, I'm just here to learn.
That's all. You don't
expect a response. You almost get one.
You leave the lab with the distinct impression that you're not done with Tutankhamun, not even close. There's a phrase you once read, scribbled in a travel journal left behind in a hostel in Luxor. Nothing that enters Egypt ever really leaves.
At the time, you thought it was just someone being poetic, maybe even dramatic.
Now, you wonder if they were simply being honest. Because Tutankhamun hasn't rested. Not really, and neither has the stuff that came out of his tomb, an avalanche of golden relics. Statues, jewelry, weapons, sandals, chariots, even food and perfume.
All carefully packed to accompany him to the afterlife. Items meant to be untouched forever. Now scattered across the globe like cursed confetti. You start your next leg in London because, of course, the British Museum. The irony isn't lost on you. Most of Egypt's greatest treasures are on display in cities thousands of kilometers from the Nile. And while Tutankhamun's tomb was mostly kept intact and eventually returned to Egypt, many smaller items and fragments weren't. Some were pilfered, others gifted, a few mysteriously never logged at all. You find yourself in a quiet, dimly lit hall, walking past rows of polished glass cases. In one of them sits a tiny amulet, unmistakably 18th dynasty, shaped like the Eye of Horus. The label reads, provenance uncertain.
You smirk. That's museum code 4. We think this might come from a cursed tomb, but no one wants to put it in writing. Nearby is a papyrus fragment featuring a prayer to Osiris in ancient script.
The paper looks brittle, but the ink is astonishingly
dark, as though written last week, not 3,000 years ago. You stare too long. Eventually, a security guard clears his throat.
Time to move on. Next stop, New York.at the Met. The Tutankhamun exhibition is treated like the Louvre's Mona Lisa Central, dramatic, backlit like a celebrity.
You press your forehead to the cool glass and study a ceremonial dagger, reportedly
forged from a meteorite.
Scientists analyzed its nickel and cobalt composition, its extraterrestrial. Really, the ancient Egyptians called it iron from the sky, which is beautiful.
And also, a little unsettling. You wonder if carrying a dagger from space into the underworld counts as good luck or cosmic overkill. Historians still argue whether the dagger was a symbolic gift or something far more practical protection, perhaps for
a king traveling through the great beyond.
Either way, it survived beautifully.
No rust.
No warping, like it was waiting.
You keep moving. Now you're in Berlin, tracing the path of a funerary bead once linked to the tomb, now tucked away in a storage archive under renovation.
A technician lets you glance at it through a magnifying case.
It's nothing flashy, just a disc of blue faience. But when you tilt it slightly, the glaze catches the light, glowing like a desert mirage, and you feel dizzy. Again, the technician frowns.
Are you okay? You say yes, automatically. What are you supposed to say?
Sorry, I am being haunted by a dead teenage pharaoh whose kingdom collapsed before his voice changed.
You fly to Paris, then Toronto, then Tokyo. In every city, the pattern repeats. 1 or 2 small pieces, almost always behind glass, half the time unlabeled or mislabeled. But the energy, always the same, still, heavy, just
Off. Even the storage centers, the places where unexhibited artifacts are kept, don't feel safe.
You visit one near Chicago, supposedly home to a creative tomb debris removed during the original excavation. Not glamorous stuff, just broken fragments, packing straw, maybe some pottery shards. But as you walk through the warehouse, you realize something bizarre. The crate is padlocked, triple sealed,
Stored in a corner under emergency lighting. Nobody's touched it in
years.
Too many staff got sick, the archivist mutters.
Then changes the subject. You don't press. The more you investigate, the clearer it becomes. This isn't about one tomb, or one boy, or even one curse.
It's about a pattern, things taken,
People changed,
a presence that lingers, and not everything has stayed in museums. A retired private collector in Belgium once claimed to own a set of carved Ushapti, those
tiny servant statues meant to work for the pharaoh in the afterlife. He purchased them from an anonymous Cairo contact in the 1940s. Within months of receiving them, his housekeeper fell down the stairs.
His dog ran away. His wife left him.
And every mirror in his house, every single one cracked, he kept.
Them anyway, because of course he did. Fringe researchers, yes. They're out there have tracked at least 17 private owners of suspected Tutankhamun relics.
Nearly all report bad luck. Some experienced hallucinations.
Others developed
Obsessions.
One woman abandoned her family to move to Thebes, where she lives alone and refuses to touch modern metal. You think she might be the only honest one, because now, as you ride the elevator back down to your hotel lobby in Vienna, with one last museum stop left, your chest feels heavier, like something is hitching a ride, and the kicker,
You never even touched anything. Well,
except that scarab, which is currently in a zippered pouch inside your coat. You didn't turn it in. You didn't
lock it. You just
kept it. It felt harmless at the time, and now
you're not so sure. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of sand. Not wind, not footsteps, just sand, sliding, whispering, shifting across the floor of your Vienna hotel room like it's being poured through an invisible hourglass.
You sit up quickly.
It stops. Nothing's there. The scarab is still in your coat pocket. You check it twice. It's cold, ice cold, though the room isn't. You take it out and hold it in your palm. It almost vibrates. You tell yourself it's just the adrenaline.
That your mind is playing tricks.
That maybe it's altitude sickness, or jet lag, or the carbonara from the sketchy little place downstairs. Then the lights flicker, and you stop telling yourself anything. The next day, you visit the Kunsthistorisches Museum.
It's elegant,
civilized.
You walk through long marble halls full of polished stone gods and gods and gods.
Greco-Roman,
Mesopotamian, Egyptian.
Each face stares back at you with the same flat knowing. We're here for one thing, a fragmented,
all relief from the Amarna period, showing a faint outline of Tutankhamun's name carved over an older one, likely his father. Akhenaten, that in itself
is chilling. It's like watching history rewrite itself. Tut's very existence had been erased, deliberately scrubbed from monuments by successors who wanted nothing to do with his father's monotheistic revolution. His tomb only survived because
no one thought he was worth remembering. The relief is badly damaged.
Bits of pigment cling to the stone, like flakes of someone's memory. You lean in close. There's a gouge at the corner of the cartouche, right through Tutankhamun's name. Not accidental. Someone tried to rip it out completely. Historians still argue whether this was a priest's job, or the work of a vengeful successor like Horemheb. Either way, it worked.
For centuries, Tutankhamun was a ghost with no name, until Carter, until you, because now you're part of this. Whether you like it or not. You sit on a bench, facing a sarcophagus on display. It's not Tutankhamun's, but it's from the same dynasty. Same style.
Same red quartzite. Same guardian deities carved into the lid. And you realize something. They weren't trying to keep people out. They were trying to keep something in. The curse, as people call it, isn't some petty booby trap or poison needle or mystical revenge against greedy tourists. That would be far too neat. This is something deeper, stranger,
Older than names. It's obsession. Possession. Attention. You think back to that museum in Cairo, how the eyes on Tut's golden mask seem to meet yours.
not by accident, not a fluke of sculpture or shadow. He
Was watching, still is. You look down at your coat pocket, at the outline of the scarab pressing through the fabric like it's trying to emerge. You don't even want to hold it anymore, but you can't seem to let go. That's the real curse, isn't it?
not death, but fascination. People don't drop dead anymore, at least not like they did in 1923. No collapsing aristocrats.
No spooky snakes.
Just people like you, slowly unraveling under the weight of a story they couldn't stop chasing in. The museum gift shop. You watch other visitors shuffle past postcards and cheap replicas. They laugh.
They buy Tutankhamun themed bookmarks.
A couple poses for a selfie beside a golden mask poster.
They have no idea. You wonder how many others have carried something home, something that wasn't meant to leave the sands of the valley. And
That's when it happens again. A flicker in your peripheral vision. Just a shadow, but in the reflection. In the glass of the sarcophagus display. You spin dot in a wonder, but the shadow lingers in your mind, long after you leave, later that night, in your hotel room. You really try to let it go. You pull the scarab from your coat, lay it flat on the desk, and stare. It's tiny,
harmless.
just a smooth chunk of faience with faint carvings on the back, symbols you don't understand. They look like birds, or arms, or reeds. You Google them, half seriously. Rough translation. He returns to silence. Cool, that's totally fine. Totally not sinister. You laugh, then shut your laptop. And that's when your phone starts ringing. It's an unknown number.
Cairo country code. You answer. No one speaks. Just that sound again, the sand.
Moving, sliding, pouring. You don't sleep. You repack your things. The scarab stays on the desk. You leave it behind.
You're done. You fly home the next day, telling
yourself it's over. That nothing followed you. That it was all just a weird phase, and for a few weeks, that holds. Your dreams are a little strange.
You feel tired all the time.
But nothing unmanageable, until the dream shift. You're back in the tomb. You see Carter lighting the candle. You hear the stone grind as the antechamber opens. You step forward, deeper, darker, and in the shadows. The golden mask waits for you, smiling. The airport feels like a liminal space now. You're back in Cairo.
You told yourself you'd never return, but then again, you told yourself you'd left the story behind, and yet
Here you are, standing once again in the dry heat in the city that doesn't sleep, where the air tastes like dust and diesel, and every glance over your shoulder feels just a bit too late. You've come full circle, but this time, you're not heading to a museum. You're not joining a tour group or following Carter's footsteps with a guidebook in hand. You're going back to the source. The Valley of the King's Dot. It doesn't even feel real anymore. The way the cliffs rise around you like crumbling teeth. The silence pressing down like a wool blanket. The same winding road, only now it's nearly empty.
No archaeologists, no tourists, no bright yellow hard hats or camera flashes.
Just you, a guide who won't make eye contact, and a jeep that rattles like bones in a sack. You're not here as a spectator this time. You're here because you have to finish something. The entrance to KV-60 to Tutankhamun's tomb is cordoned off.
Now,
Sealed again.
a sort of ceremonial protection.
You find that comforting. Right until your guide quietly unlocks a side gate that shouldn't exist. No one's supposed to be here today, but someone has arranged it. He nods once, then walks away. Doesn't wait. Doesn't want to know. So you descend alone. Again, the air inside is cooler than you remember. Not fresher, just still, like it hasn't moved since the day Carter first cracked the seal. You count the steps as you go down.
You don't know why.
Maybe it helps you feel in control. The walls are the same. Painted gods with long limbs
And stylized eyes.
The yellow plaster glows softly under your flashlight. You half expect the figures to move. Just a tilt of the head. A blink. They don't. Not yet. You enter the burial chamber. The golden shrines are gone. Of course disassembled, shipped, exhibited. but the space feels full anyway. Thick even, like a place that remembers.
You walk the perimeter, brushing your
Fingers along the stone, and then you stop. There's a new crack in the back wall. Thin, hairline, but it wasn't there before. You kneel, press your ear to it. Nothing at first. Then breathing, long, slow, ancient.
like wind down a canyon or lungs in a sarcophagus. You pull back.
Hard. You should leave. You know that. Any sane person would, but you also know. This is the moment.
The center of the spiral. The exact second in history where curiosity becomes devotion. And devotion becomes something irreversible. So you reach into your backpack and pull out the scarab. Yes, that scarab. You didn't leave it behind. Of course not. It wouldn't let you. You place it gently on the floor, right in front of the crack.
Wall.
The flashlight flickers once, then twice.
The light steadies, and now the walls begin to whisper, not words, not even voices, just the weight of centuries folding in around you like silk. Images flood your mind, scribes at work, priests chanting in incense-thick tunes, gold leaf being pressed into wood. A boy king sitting motionless as a vulture crown is lowered onto his head. You're not hallucinating. You're remembering, or rather, it's remembering through you. You back away slowly. The scarab stays. You don't need to take it anymore. It has done its job. Back above ground, the sun blinds you. You blink, and for a moment, every shadow looks like a figure in linen, wrappings, but it's just heat shimmer, mirage, probably. You ride in silence. Your driver doesn't ask questions, and back at the hotel, you finally let yourself collapse. Sleep comes fast, but it doesn't come easy. Your dreams are louder now, not just images, but stories.
They unspool like ancient papyrus, tales of court.
Intrigue of sudden illness, of betrayals too delicate to name. You see a boy with swollen limbs and hollow eyes. You see him fall. You see a mask lower over his face, beautiful.
Inhuman, eternal, and somewhere. You hear a voice whisper your name. The next morning, you wake with sand on your pillow. Not much, just a few grains, but enough. The curse isn't what people think.
It's not punishment. It's prisons. Tutankhamun was forgotten once. Now he never will be, because you'll tell the story again and again, and through you, he'll live, just as he always planned. So here, you are back where we started, but changed somehow. Maybe you feel a little strange,
A little haunted, a little more aware of how thin the veil is between the past and what we carry with us. It's okay. Let that feeling settle. You're safe now. The golden mask has faded from view. The tomb walls are silent again, and the desert timeless and vast has
returned to its patient waiting. The scarab is gone. The whispers have stopped. The curse, if there ever was one, has lifted its gaze and moved on. Let your breathing slow. Feel the cool of your sheets, the softness beneath your head. Let the weight of sand and story melt away, grain by grain. There's no need to solve every mystery tonight.
Some questions are meant to rest in the dark, just as Tutankhamun once did, unbothered by time, by memory, by the flickering curiosity of the living. You did well. You made it through. And now, the tomb door closes behind us quietly, gently with
no need for fear, just stillness, just calm. Let your eyes close if they haven't already. Let the echoes fade. Sleep is here now, and in this soft space between dreams and waking, you can rest knowing that history, no matter how cursed or golden, would wait until morning. Good night, explorer. You survived, for now.